Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's such a busy time, and really appreciate folks from the Citizen Schools family joining for what I think is going to be a great hour-long conversation. I'm Eric Schwartz, the founding CEO, long time ago, 27 years ago, of Citizen Schools, and it still feels like the organization courses deeply through my blood. I am so excited to still be affiliated on the board of directors, and incredibly excited in a moment to turn it over to two pillars of the Citizen Schools community, our new CEO, Oscar Cruz, who is amazing. I look forward to all of you getting to know him better. I loved getting to know him through the search process and at my home a few weeks ago, and he's off to a great start. And then also Miecha Forbes, who is just an incredible human being. I think our newest member of our board of directors, vice president for people and culture at the Aspen Institute, leading their future of work. And she's going to lead our discussion and interview Oscar, and they're both awesome. I wanted just to share a couple really quick welcoming remarks. Little bit about context for Citizen Schools in this moment in time as Oscar takes over his leadership of the organization. My reflection is we've been through a lot of changes over 27 years, and we have an incredibly bright future ahead. And while the exact delivery mode of our work has evolved a lot, as it should, and I think Oscar noted we're sort of in like startup mode again. There's an opportunity for us to keep reshaping and keep honing exactly how we deliver our model. I think a couple things have stayed the same. And one is really just the real deep belief in the power of experiential real world learning. In the very beginning at the Dever School in Dorchester, I remember sitting around and doing focus groups with fifth graders and fourth graders about this program. And I remember one of them, Nick Erner, talking about experts and wanting to learn from experts. And he was this little 10-year-old kid, like pounding the table, saying, I want to learn from experts. Do you hear me, experts? And that opportunity for young people to learn through real world opportunities, experientially and from experts, is amazing. Just the power of mentorship and the power of how do we all find ways to kind of learn through experiences, but also relationships. Is so critical. I think the pandemic has revealed that maybe more than ever. And I think that's always been and always, I think, will be at the foundation of Citizen Schools. And then lastly, just the power of a second shift. We, I think as a society, as a democracy, can't just say, hey, we're putting the 3 million public school teachers on notice, like it's your job to raise the next generation. Nor can it only be the families and the parents. I think the rest of us need to sort of step up and form kind of a second shift of educators that really join with parents, a group that Oscar's worked a lot with, and with teachers to really bring young people all they need to thrive and to succeed. The last few years, wow, I mean, it has really brought into sharp relief, I think, some of the challenges that we're up against around equity and around opportunity. And it's also, I think, in education, revealed kind of, we're at the most kind of open space, I think, that we've been at in a couple of decades. I think for most of Citizen Schools' history, there was a really clear focus, and the attention in national education circles was really around testing and standards, and those were important things in some ways to sort of lift up the importance of standards and try to shine a spotlight on inequalities that existed. But now I think it's real open territory as to what's sort of the next generation of educational improvement built around. And I think there's huge opportunities for Citizen Schools to be in the middle of that conversation and play a leading role under Oscar's leadership at really helping to define what's needed to give every young person in the country the opportunities that they deserve. So I think we're in for a really rich conversation. And with that, I want to turn it over to Miecha and to Oscar, and I'll be here and jump in maybe with questions or thoughts in the chat along the way. But thank you, Oscar, for joining us and for your leadership. And thank you, Miecha, for joining us and your leadership. And I'll turn it over, I guess, first to you, Miecha.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. I love seeing how intimate this conversation is going to be. These are some of my favorite conversations. So even though there's no fire in the background, it is going to be very a fireside chat. So thank you. I know there's a lot of things pulling at our time, particularly in December. So I appreciate that you took the time to spend this hour with us today. So I'm just going to say a little bit. I won't say much about me because I really want this to be about you, Oscar, but just a little bit about why this is very much like a full circle moment for me. I am absolutely honored and humbled to be one of the newest board members at Citizen Schools. In 2005, I accepted an offer to join Citizen Schools as the first director of recruiting. And I was in DC at the time, moving back to Boston, which was my home. I grew up in Mattapan. And so to go home and to be able to work in an organization that was working with young people and in the schools that I grew up in it meant the world to me. And so I remember that so vividly. I was reporting to Emily McCann, and it was part of a great group at the time, and Eric was at the helm, and we were going to change the world of education. And we did some amazing work, and we still are. But it was such a pivotal time for me in my nonprofit career, and so I think of it very fondly. And so it really does feel full circle to be here as a board member and to be welcoming a leader like you, Oscar. I spent a lot of time since leaving Citizen Schools in talent and recruiting in the education reform space. And then I moved into the executive search space at Koya, where I was there for 8 years, working on recruiting leaders to organizations much like Citizen Schools. Actually, Citizen Schools was my first client when I got to Koya, which again, lots of full circle moments for me. And so I know what it's like to, be in a position where you're looking for leaders and you're looking to place them, but you're not just looking for any leader. You're looking for leaders who are really going to move forward the work of the organization, who are going to transform the work. But oftentimes there's an emphasis on you're kind of hoping and praying that you find a leader who maybe looks like and resonates and understands the communities that you serve in a very intimate and deep way. And all too often that's not the case. And we know that, and all those of us who've been nonprofit, we know how that is true. When you look at the inner workings of an organization, it doesn't look like the communities that you serve. And so often executive recruiters and search committees are looking for leaders who have some deep understanding. And it's not just race and ethnicity, it's just it's class, it's just a first in your family to go to college. Is something that really attaches you, that kind of connective tissue to what the experience is of those that you serve, because keeping that in mind, we all know, helps you to be a leader around the table who can bring that to bear in your decision making, and who can add that to the conversation that's taking place. So it is with a great pride that I welcome you to Citizen Schools, Oscar, and to see you step into the CEO role. I, like so many of us, are just thrilled to have you here. So we're looking forward to learning a little bit more about you and hearing about your vision and kind of some questions on why Citizen Schools, why now. And also, I hope everyone's okay with this being, since it is a small group, we'll bring you into the conversation a little bit. Since we do have a manageable enough size, I was hoping we can go around quickly and offer our name, title, or kind of where what you do, or what your connection is to Citizen Schools, and where you're calling in or dialing in from. Okay, can we do that really quickly? We can do it popcorn style. I'm going to just name someone on the screen, and then you can pop it around to someone else. Is that all right with everyone?
Perfect.
All right. Since Rebecca's giving me this great smile every now and again, I'm going to kick it to you, Rebecca. You want to start?
I felt that coming. Hi there. Hi, Oscar. Hi, Miecha. I'm Rebecca Dalton. I am a senior consultant at Bellwether Education Partners. Been involved with Citizen Schools, I think, since 2016 when I first did an apprenticeship in Brooklyn. And Citizen Schools was just kind of this connective tissue for me. I moved to Boston not knowing anybody, and at that point in time was connected through the Citizen Schools team to the community here, joined the board of champions here, and now we've merged that with the New York board. So thrilled to be working with Lucy as my co-chair and one other person I think you'll meet in the January Fireside chat. But it's a pleasure to be with you all today, and welcome to the team, Oscar.
Thank you.
And I'll call on Alicia.
Thanks. So my name is Alicia Muscat, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the former interim CEO, soon to have a new title, member of the Citizen Schools. I'm part of the leadership team here, and have been with Citizen Schools coming on 3 years, which is really exciting. And I just, given the theme here, I just want to say how much of a pleasure it's been working with Oscar, and so excited for you all and our broader community to get to know him and his leadership better, as I've had, I think, a unique pleasure of having a lot of overlapping time with him so far. And I will pass it to those of you with your cameras off. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Leah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leah Daniels, and I actually am one of the board members, obviously, on Citizen Schools. I've been a part of Citizen Schools since, oh gosh, I think 2018, but a board member only since 2019. And I actually am a director of business development at Nielsen, and I've really enjoyed my time working with Citizen Schools and hope to continue. Thanks. I will pass it off to Whitney.
Thanks, Leah. Whitney Martinez. I use she, her pronouns. I have been with Citizen Schools for 5 months now as VP of Philanthropy and External Engagement. Just really excited to be here. I've had a really long journey with education. I've been in the classroom as a teacher. I've worked with kids on and off the autism spectrum, and I have really personal, close ties to the education space. As a first generation college student, as an immigrant to this country who did not know how to speak English, as someone who has a brother who has been really marred by the justice system here in the US, and who really had the same opportunities that I did as an immigrant child, but who has really battled with education all of his life. And that's led him to make some not so great choices. So that's what's really pulled me into connecting with Citizen Schools, to be in a place where I can affect change at that level for other students, to be able to create a future that they believe is really more than where they are now. And that's just beyond the possibilities that they're able to imagine for themselves. And I will pass it over to Sierra.
Thank you, Whitney. Hi, my name is Sierra Bush. I use she, her pronouns. I've been with Citizen Schools for over 2 years now. I started in September of 2019. My title is Director of Philanthropy and External Engagement, so I'm on the same team as Whitney. And I work really closely on the newly combined Board of Champions with Rebecca, Lucy, Nathania, and Leah. And I will pass it to Anna.
Thanks, Sierra. My name is Anna Yu. I am the Chief Growth Officer at Citizen Schools. And I'm also taking on a role shortly to support operations at CS as well. Similar to Whitney's story, I think what drew me to Citizen Schools is really my connection to the communities and the students that we serve. So I'm also an immigrant. I come from a low-income community. Everyone in my sort of generation is first generation college graduates, meaning my brother, sister, and myself were the first in our families to go to college. So I feel a deep connection with the students that we serve and to the mission in general. And with that, I will pass it along to Lucy.
Hi. Apologies for keeping my camera off. I'm eating lunch. Sorry. So I'm Lucy. I'm a software engineer at Google and got involved with Citizen Schools, I think in 2015, maybe 14, when I really was looking for a place to volunteer and teach computer science and kind of provide opportunities that I had as a middle schooler that I knew were very unique and really special and really influenced my career. And so I've been volunteering with Citizen Schools and am now part of the board of champions, our newly combined group with some of the other folks on this call, and she, her pronouns. And I will pass it to Nathania.
Hi, everyone. Apologies, I am in a shared space, hence my video camera being off, but it's lovely to meet you all. She, her pronouns. I am global manager of strategic projects at a law firm, Skadden Arps, I'm based in New York, and connection to Citizen Schools. We started with an apprenticeship at the firm, I want to say 2014, 2015. And yeah, then I took on running that program and corralling the attorneys and making sure the curriculum was the best for the students, and joined the board and am now a champion, I suppose, with the newly formed board. Few years ago now. I stopped counting because it's just all wonderful and exciting. So it's great to meet you all. I went through and I think everyone else has introduced themselves. So I'm excited to hear from Oscar once more. Thank you all.
Thank you all. It's wonderful to see all the points of connection and all of your collective passion for this work. So our objective today is to learn more about you, Oscar. So we'll jump right in. But one more directive is we will be taking questions in the chat. I'm going to kick off with a few questions, but really, if you have questions you want to ask, about Oscar and who he is and what he hopes to bring, his, vision so far, experience so far, and his short time so far, please feel free to ask those questions. Okay. And Oscar, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, first question is, tell us what inspires you most about the CEO role and the possibility of working here at Citizen Schools.
Well, first of all, Miecha, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And we really have been going, and I've been going around and listening type of tour. And these are the kind of conversations that I really appreciate, because it takes all of us, right, to be able to work towards the mission of the organization. So just first of all, thank you, Eric. You've been nothing more than welcoming to me, and it's been just great to be able to have your wisdom, your knowledge, and the team. Alicia, Whitney, Anna, thank you for everything. Sierra, thank you so much for the hard work you're doing. I'm excited to be at Citizen Schools. And look, I think for me, the number one thing that attracted me to not only the position, right, but the organization is the mission around hands-on learning. That really resonated with me because I do believe that my experience around how I fell in love with learning, what does it mean to be someone who loves learning, really comes from my parents. And it really resonates with the idea that by doing, you actually are really experiencing what you want to learn. And my parents were both, they never, graduated high school nor college, but somehow they were able to always create curiosity, right? Problem solving. My dad would take me to the body shop where he works, and I would learn about fractions, and as he was mixing paints, and he would paint the car, I would go work with my mom, who's a housekeeper, and her problem solving. She didn't know the language. Somehow she had to figure it out. People's homes, cleaning homes, even from the washer, let's say, or the dryer. And she always had to force herself to learn and to be able to problem solve. So when I heard about the mission, it automatically really resonated with, I think, is what it is really quality education should be. And I do believe Eric mentioned our history in terms of education in this country recently, and the push for testing. While it was important being able to see achievement gaps, I think sometimes it forced us to only look at the negative, at this deficit model. or what kids don't have, right? Like you're constantly measuring what kids don't have. They don't know how to read to third. They don't know how to math. They don't know algebra. And then if you flip it on the other side and you start thinking about more, what do kids have, especially low-income communities, communities of color? They already have resiliency. They already have hard work. They already have all these great assets that I think that experiential learning really taps into, right? And is able to say we all could be learners around this. So that was important to me. And the other part that, as Eric had mentioned, is also the career exploration and mentors. In my own experience as I went through school, anytime that I had the opportunity to see beyond just my own surroundings, created more options in my life to think maybe I want to do that, right? Even if I didn't really want to explore it, I spent some internship working at the Department of Water and Power, doing some small projects, but you saw people, role models, people who were doing different things in their lives. And so that always opened up the options for me. And I think that is so important to do it for the students that we serve. And then, lastly, I would say at the period of time that Citizen Schools is at, I think that it also drove me. I believe that there's a little bit of that entrepreneur inside of me that is excited about these moments of change, where we're rethinking, we're asking big questions. And after meeting the team and the board members, I felt like, the right pieces were in place to say, how can I be part of this team and contribute? But at the end of the day, it's going to be the team that moves the organization forward. So that was my immediate reaction to the conversation as I was going through the board and learning about the staff. Is really, at the end of the day, the mission and the people.
Thank you so much, Oscar. I'm curious, the executive recruiter in me is curious of your, literally your first thought when you hung up the phone from that first conversation. Was there an emotion or a thought that you had that comes to mind?
So I would say the first interaction with the recruiter was on LinkedIn, which was interesting, right? So they connected with me on LinkedIn. We went back and forth with some questions, and the first is like, do I have to move to Boston? Is that is that part of it? And I'm thinking, well, if they're reaching out to me, of course, probably not, because they must know that I'm in LA. So part of it was was an immediate reaction about just where I reside, and with COVID, working from home. That was the first reaction I had. So no, but I'm not moving. I'm staying in LA. So I'm here, but I just visited Boston. We had a great time with the team. We had a mini retreat with the executive team. So we spent some quality time, and I'm going to be going back very regularly.
Awesome. Thank you. It's interesting to see in recruiting now, the location question has come later and later. It's no longer the first question given COVID. So it's definitely a change.
Yeah.
One more question, a curiosity is,
yeah.
Because you talked about your passion and just how much experiential learning and hands-on learning resonates. If you were teaching hands-on at apprenticeship, or you had to teach something that was a hobby or passion of yours to kids right now, what would that be?
That's great. Okay, so not too many people know this, but I do like painting. There's a part of me that is expresses myself, but my wife will tell you, you take out a paint once every 2 years, you work on it, and then you put it out, back there, and you never see the light of day. So I do find painting is a way for me to express something, my emotions, feelings, and I would love to, do an apprenticeship regarding painting. I think students learn in so many different ways, right? And that's another way that I feel like I also learn a lot when I'm painting. In fact, it's a horrible picture, but I had to put it up. But that's a painting, kind of like an abstract painting that I worked on for a couple months. And then my wife is like, what are you going to do with that? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to put it up.
Awesome. Well, giving you lots of applause. I love it. I love the colors. Thank you for sharing that. See, you learn interesting things in these conversations. So my next question, right now we know that there's so much energy and talk, and rightfully so, around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We also know those things are core values at Citizen Schools. and an increasingly important focus of the work. How does your experience, however you want to define your experience, Oscar, how does your experience to date shape your hope for Citizen Schools diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work?
Yeah, no, thank you, Miecha, for that question, because, and this is not just Citizen Schools, we're talking about, as a nation, we're wrestling with big questions about our history and our evolution around race in this country, that I think is a valid conversation to have in every aspect of our society. In this case, we're talking about nonprofits and citizen schools. But for me, the question ends up being, can we actually meet our mission if we don't talk about race in our communities, right? And what I think I've learned and I've experienced during the last 2 years of conversation is that everybody's at a different place in the conversation. And there's a lot of self-learning that we have to do to understand that. But as a nonprofit leader, I would say that for me is how do I'm able to lead through this by centering the conversation of race as a pivotal step in meeting our mission. Because the students that we're serving, they don't live in a bubble. They don't live in a science classroom. They're living in the real life where their real experience is, in many cases, about racism. In many cases, it's about institutional barriers that they're facing, right? So if we want to say we want to help those students, especially Black, Brown students, communities of color, immigrant students, we have to take into account what are the obstacles they're facing. And if we want to make learning real, hands-on, real life learning, it's got to be part of the conversation, right? So I think as we explore this, it is about centering, not diverting from our mission, but really asking that question, can we actually solve our mission or address our mission without talking about race? And at least for me, the question is no, we can't. So that, I think that's been a little bit of my experience. The other part is that many times I think initially many nonprofits, this question was mostly taken from a programmatic perspective, like saying, what can programs do, right? And I do believe that we're making progress as we're expanding that question to include more than just programs, but rather the culture of the organization. How do we support leaders of color in our nonprofit, right? How do we look at policies, hiring policies, vendor policies that really are talking about centering the bigger conversation about race and inequity in our society? So I am hopeful that it is a much more complex question than just a programmatic question. It is a staffing question. It's a fundraising question. It's a marketing question. But that is a part of the evolution that as a team, we need to have some real conversations around. And as well as the board, which I have felt really supported by the board as we're starting to have this conversation, is that we need to not have just a DEI day or DEI conversation. It has to be always part of our conversation as we're talking about our mission. But it's a journey, and Miecha, maybe as you have experience in your own experience, work or other areas, we are all at different points of the conversation. Is how do we move everybody along without leaving anybody behind?
Totally agree with that, Oscar. I use that example a lot about moving people along the spectrum, and I often relate it to it's a skill and will issue, and people are at different places, just like with regard to their functional experience. So thank you for that. I'm wondering though, in your recent roles or in your recent work experience, is there something that you saw work really well, like a success around DEIB work that you think just was exciting or worth naming or mentioning? Is there something, it can be small, it can be something you saw work really well?
Yeah, maybe simple, but I would say just naming it, just saying it. I've been related to some organizations where even just saying Black and Brown students or just saying institutional racism would have been something that would have been edited out of a document, right? I think the first step to any type of conversation and going deep of it is just naming it, right? And while it may feel really simple, going from thinking about it to saying, no, we're gonna make it a priority and we're gonna talk the talk, could be very hard to do, right? And so those are very entrenched conversations. And so I think that has been one. The other, I would say, is that at the same time you start having some of those conversations, sometimes there are folks that feel uncomfortable and may not want to be part of it anymore, part of the group or part of the funding or just a partner. But what has been great is that as many people may not feel ready yet, you see others who are saying, I want to have this conversation, I want to jump in. So that feels really motivating, that as that there are folks coming in and saying, I want to be part of these conversations, I want to support this, I want to be a champion for this. So that's been a really, I would call it a win in the work that we've been doing in the past.
I definitely agree in naming it. I love that. Thank you. I started that question with focusing on, the fact that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are core values at Citizen Schools. Do you want to share a couple of your personal core values that you bring to your management role or your leadership role in general?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've been having really good conversations with the executive team. And one of them is gratitude, and being able to lead through gratitude. And many times we are grateful for others and for what others have done, but we haven't verbalized it. So something that we've been starting to practice more in some of our meetings is just takes a little bit of time to be grateful and share each other why we're grateful for, right? And so that's been one. The other part I do believe is there's a sense of leading through humility and being vulnerable. I still grew up, I think, in an era where there was this really hard line between my personal self and my work self, and where you had to feel like you almost had to switch, right, from being at work and being all present and there's no emotion to being at home and kind of letting go. I do try to model more the reality is that we are, as people, we come to this work as who we are, and sometimes it's okay sometimes to be who we are, right? And just being humble and grateful for each other, I think are things that I try to incorporate in my day-to-day work with team. And ultimately, it's about team building and trust building. I like to say that I don't think the purpose of building trust is to avoid conflict, but rather is because you need trust to work through conflict. Because there's hard conversations to be had, there are hard decisions to be made, and so that I believe that helps with working as a team.
Thanks so much, Oscar. That definitely resonates with me personally. I am of that same generation, of that fine line between work and your personality, and I often call us the master compartmentalizers. But now when you're in a workplace and you ask people to compartmentalize their identities, that's often the challenge, for organizations. We have to figure that out. We have to break down those barriers. So thank you for that. So we all know, as many leaders who start out in an organization, that you're on a listening tour to get to know all things Citizen Schools, right? I want to ask you to divulge anything you're learning, because I know truly how you need time and space to have everything digest, right? And just sit with it. But I'm wondering, as you're talking to staff and AmeriCorps members, board members, folks in the community, funders, and others, as you continue this listening tour, what are some of the key things you hope to learn, things that you want to learn more about?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think first, what I'm going to have, yes, there's going to be a time where I'm focusing on learning. I would like to say I would always want to be on a listening tour, right? And that you have to maintain that communication channels open. In particular, I think the place where I'm really going to be moving towards right now, as the year starts, is being able to hear from the people we serve, right? From the communities we're serving, from the parents, from the students, from the educators, because many times I feel that, and this happens very naturally, right? We work in nonprofits, we care a lot about it, is that only because we care doesn't necessarily mean that we have all the right answers. And many times when we're confused, we may not know what to do. Usually the people we serve are going to know exactly what they need and what they want. And it's just a matter of kind of listening to them and saying, okay, let us make sure that what we're doing is addressing the needs in the community. So I'm really going to start the year by ensuring that I'm having conversations with the families, bringing those voices to the board, so the board can hear that, bringing those voices to the executive team, to the staff. So that's something that I'm really interested in hearing more, is going to be the voices of the families and students and educators that we work with.
Nice. Just a logistical question. I'm wondering, are you navigating all of your listening to our meetings virtually? Have you been Zooming all of them?
No, it's been, when we recently when I went to Boston, we were able to have a retreat with the staff, and all the executive team was able to come back into Boston in person. So we have a couple folks like Anna who are there, and it was just so nice to have some 3D experience, right? And so I've been going to a couple meetings where, when possible, and where people feel very comfortable to do it in person. Otherwise, there's been a lot of Zoom calls.
Gotcha. Okay. I think we're all navigating that now.
Yeah.
Moves from Zoom to sort of some in person, and you have to judge what you're comfortable with and what others are comfortable with. We're all navigating that unfamiliar space. So.
Well, I something funny that happened is that I met Ben, who is our leads finance, and I looked at Ben and I'm like, Ben, you're 6'4", he's huge, right? And you lose track of those things in the Zoom world, right? Where everybody is nightly fitting into one little square in the computer. But those little things were so just so great in terms of getting to know each other.
Totally agree with that. I was able to go into the Aspen office for the first time last week after being there for over a year. And everybody's like, we were wondering how tall you were. I was like, I'm not. I'm not. All right. I'm going to keep going down with some questions. How are you, and this one, actually, I'm going to say this one, we solicited questions in advance. So this one came in advance. How are you planning to lead Citizen Schools through the continued pandemic?
Yeah.
A graduate student, actually, from Brandeis.
Yeah. I think this question, first of all, we've always known in the nonprofit sector that, change is constant. But more than ever, we have to understand we're living in the gray, and we're going to be in the gray for a while. That's not something that's going to change in the immediate future. COVID throws, again, such a great impact in just programmatic work, having to restart, restop, rethink work. So one of them is how to be able to, as a team, be able to navigate through uncertainty is going to be one. The other is, so many of our staff are living the consequences and the impact of COVID in their own personal lives. From people who are, have family members who have suffered, who have, been impacted, the economics of it, the stress of it, the social emotional part of it, right? Of being at home. Depression is a very real thing. Burnout is a real thing. So I think it's being able to truly be able to support staff through this process and navigate that stress and that COVID environment. We have a couple staff members who haven't even been able to find childcare for their kids, and they're still navigating that, and they have to do their full job and having to be childcare providers. So I think it's being able to just meet staff where they are, to be realistic and being able to be supportive. It's going to be critical. And on the programmatic end, we're doing a great job of having to reinvent and rethink how COVID is impacting the delivery of programs. But I do think that the uncertainty and being able to manage through uncertainty and being able to support staff is going to be critical as we go through this.
I definitely agree. I'm wondering one thing, and when leaders, and you have to think about meeting people where they are. I like that you use that phrase. how do you learn kind of where people are? How do you get to know what people are experiencing, particularly if it's very different than what you may be experiencing, what your life circumstances may be in the midst of COVID? How do you do that?
This was part of the one-on-ones that I've been doing. My goal was to meet with every single staff member. I'm probably at 90% there with board members as well. And the one-on-one was not about citizen schools. It was just about, I need to, let's get to know each other, sharing stories. I got great recommendations in movies and films and things people are watching, and I started sharing it. But very naturally during those conversations, you start hearing people and what their challenges are. So developing that trust, that kind of like person-to-person relationship, it creates a safety zone for people to share what they need, right? So I think that has helped being able to develop that. And I think that's part of also what I'm trying to model for staff and leaders, leaders in the organization, is just asking the question more about how you're feeling sometimes is more important than asking, what do you think, right? So that creates a safety zone for people to share.
That's great. Thank you for that. Lucy, I want to invite you to ask your question. You have one about volunteers.
Yeah, so this question isn't quite fully formed, more of just a statement of what's been going on in the Board of Advocates and the Council of Champions and our networks of volunteers. Those two groups and now our merged group were really formed to fire up and activate our network of volunteers. And like me, many of those volunteers got involved with Citizen Schools because they wanted to share what they're passionate about. They wanted to share what they do and provide that to students. And the apprenticeship model really did allow for that. And it created the structure around that made it work for students and made it possible for volunteers to truly share their expertise, because, people just regular people who are not teachers are not actually very good at teaching. So it does require a lot of structure. But also all of that structure needed to make it work. It made it impossible to continue with. And so what we've been hearing as we're kind of transitioning to Catalyst or exploring new opportunities and new ways of doing the model is that our volunteer base is feeling really, really lost. And they don't know, do I still fit in? There's only climate change on the website. I don't know anything about climate change. How does this work? Where is my place in this organization now? Is, even if we're feeling really connected to the overall mission, and I think fired up by the values in the changes, where we actually fit in, I think I'm hearing from a lot of folks is just nobody knows right now. And that's fine as a transition, but I'm interested to hear from you, where do you see that going long term? And what's the place of volunteers, and how do we make sure we're intentional about pulling them along and making sure that there is a place for them if we intend for there to be one? Yeah. Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it. And that's something that I have heard about, that transition and moment we're in. Obviously, as you know, we're working through it in terms of the structure. What does the new structure look like? If I were to tell you my vision of the future, I would say that, the one thing COVID has forced us to do is to be able to use technology better, right? And it has helped to open the classroom much more, and being able to have kids from, studying at home and being able to have that virtual connection could create such a powerful way to bring volunteers into the classroom where geography no longer is a barrier, right? Because in the old, maybe in the more in-person model, you had it maybe an after-school program where you try to find volunteers who live nearby who can actually come and drive and be there and be able to be one-on-one. The possibilities of actually having this talent base of experts across the board could really create a much wealth of capacity for schools to say, I need someone who is an expert in thermodynamics. I don't have a company in my small town in a rural area of California where I can find someone, yet there's someone across the country who can, right?
So the possibility is that it could actually address issues of inequity because you're able to then meet those folks who want to volunteer to where the need is. So part of that, I think it's going to be the vision of how do we get to that point where this is going to actually address those inequities even more rather than recreate some of those. So that's the possibility of it. Now, we're going through that evolution. I think schools right now are still in a survival mode, where teachers are trying to just figure out, just like in my own case, my son's a school, they're trying to figure out how the testing of COVID on a weekly basis goes well, right? So I think right now we're still a little bit still in a place where schools, it's hard for them to think even a month ahead. But I think if we are ready and prepared as things not normalize, but become a little bit more predictable, we could be a great solution to meet the schools, and not just schools, but it could be nonprofits, it could be community organizations, in being able to again put that supply of expertise with that demand of where is needed the most. I hope that addressed a little bit of that
Yes.
of your question.
Yeah.
Thanks for that great question, Lucy. Thank you. So one more question that came in advance is how would you describe the organization's value proposition to schools, the community it serves, and members of the business community? And it's interesting because I imagine this, you may have had one answer, and now as you're getting to know us and getting to know people, it may be evolving. So I would love to hear a little bit how you describe the value proposition.
That's a great question. I do think that it has evolved a little bit over time in terms of the more I'm learning. But one thing that is undisputed is the fact that there's 27 years of experience that we've had in the field of experiential learning, right? Yes, we might have been doing it in the after-school setting. Yes, it was managing after-school programs. But at the core of who we have 27 years of know-how that if we're able to connect that to both the companies and the school districts and nonprofits, it could be a powerful solution to the big questions that communities are going to be asking. I'm truly believe, like Eric said, that the tidal wave is changing. We're moving away from test-based only to the whole child conversation, social emotional learning. And I think that we could be a great player in leading conversations at the national level of saying, we've kind of tested this out. We have a lot of experience around this, and we can bring some ideas to communities on how we can do it well. I think the other connected to the volunteer conversation is that we have developed a rich relationships with many organizations, community and corporations where those sometimes they're tricky to maneuver and to develop. So we are ready to facilitate connections between many companies, many community organizations and school districts, so we can facilitate and expedite some of that partnership that comes along the way. So I think that, in this world that we're living right now, I do believe that demand for experiential learning, for lifelong, for real life learning is going to be needed. Or students needed relationships. They need people to care about them. They need real life conversations, and I think we are really well poised to be able to contribute to that.
Thank you. As we wind down, I'm sure others may be wondering this, and I want to ask, how can we support you? Are there things that we can do, us on this call or on the video, that we can do to support you or just be a resource to you? What can we do to help?
Thank you. First, yes, we're gonna need all the help from this group and from many, many more. That's one part, going back to the original question about what motivated me, is that I get excited when we can move people towards common shared goals. And right now, I think one of is going to include from volunteerism to obviously supporting the organization or mission through the donation. It could be through just your expertise, is through your voice, right? Is to elevating the fact that our families and our kids need hands-on learning to be able to be successful. So We will be in contact with all of you in ways, more tactical ways that we're going to be able to invite you to be part of this conversation. But the big answer is we're going to need all of us, and we're going to need not just us. We're going to need a lot of more people, right, to be able to change and disrupt the way that teaching and learning is happening, and make it more real to our families and be asset based. So. We will be back and we'll connect with all of you on more specific ways. But I thank you for just your support, and just being here today means that you care deeply about this work. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to end it on a fun note with something I like to call this or that. It really is not at all intellectually stimulating.
Okay.
It's more fun. I've done it in interviews, but I do it with my 13-year-old in the car. So that's really where this comes from, if I have to be honest. So I'm going to say a thing, and you can tell me one or the other. If it could be neither, but if you have a preference for one, you can tell us which one it is. Okay. Ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Pie or cake?
Oh, I mean, just immediately cake, like ice cream cake.
I'm going with you on that one.
Yeah.
Football or
that's my
basketball?
birthday. Football or basketball, all the way. I thought at some point in my life, I thought I was going to play with the Lakers, and then I just got to 5'9", and my skills were not there. So, but basketball.
Winter or summer?
Winter. I can put a coat on and feel cozy. When it's hot, it's just, I don't know. There's nothing you can do.
Books or movies?
I would say Audible. I got in such a great friend. I mean, I'm listening to books every time I'm driving or running.
Nice. That is nice. I like it. Breakfast burrito or breakfast taco?
Ooh, only because a burrito is bigger than a taco, I would say breakfast burrito.
I like the way you think, Oscar.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for humoring me. Thank you for allowing me to do this. Thank you for inviting me to this space. And thank you all for coming into this space today and for all that you all offer to Citizen Schools. Thank you, Alicia and Anna and Eric, for working behind the scenes to get this all going. Really appreciate it, and just appreciate your energy, Oscar, your enthusiasm, your passion, taking away, naming it, meeting people where they are. Those are always good things to keep in mind. And just know that you have all of us supporting you. It's funny, you're right in the middle of my screen, which is perfect and appropriate for the fact that we are surrounding you and we are your village, and we're here to support you and cheer you on. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miecha. Thank you, Eric, all the staff and everybody for being here. And we will need your support in many ways, and look forward to working together with all of you.